I was elbow deep in routing a critical server cluster at 2 a.m., the hum of the data center a familiar lullaby, when the text message incinerated my world. Don't bother coming home. My lawyer will be in touch about the house. I've taken what's mine. It was from Sarah. 15 years, a mortgage, 2 cats, all vaporized in 26 words on a tiny glowing screen. I blinked, the server status lights blurring into meaningless streaks. 26 words. My fingers tightened on the KT6 cable I was about to crimp. The notification came through our shared family cloud account, a calendar invite for our new beginning. From Sarah, shared with a man named Julian Vance, scheduled for that very night at my house. I read it twice. My name is Michael Evans, 46, a senior network architect, and I'd just been architected out of my own life. I finished crimping the cable, plugged it in. Watched the link light turn green. The critical system was back online. My team would be relieved in the morning. I closed my laptop, logged off my terminal, and walked out of the chilled air of the server room into the pre-dawn quiet of the office. The text message burned a hole in my pocket, the sheer, calculated cruelty of it. My lawyer will be in touch. I've taken what's mine. I drove home, not to the house we shared, but to a small, nondescript motel near the airport. I didn't reply to her text, not a word. Kenji, one of my lead engineers who'd been with me on late night deployments countless times, had seen the blood drain from my face when I got the text. He'd asked, "Everything okay, Mike?" I just nodded. Just a system alert from home, already handled. He knew better than to push. We network guys understand complex systems, and sometimes the most complex system is the one you think you know best, right before it spectacularly fails. My own internal system was now on red alert, but outwardly, I initiated emergency shutdown of all emotional responses. I needed a cold boot. The truth was, this wasn't entirely out of the blue. It was more like a storm I'd seen gathering on the distant horizon, a flicker of lightning I'd dismissed as heat lightning. For the past year, Sarah had changed. She'd always been ambitious, a sharp marketing manager, but her ambition had taken a new, restless edge. There were the hushed phone calls she'd take on the patio, the ones that ended abruptly if I walked in. The new investment strategy. Seminars she started attending on weekends, run by a smooth-talking wealth advisor. I'd never met Julian Vance, the name now seared into my brain from that calendar invite. Her laptop, once casually left open, was now password-protected with a new, complex passphrase. My attempts to discuss our finances, which had become unusually opaque, were met with, "Don't worry, Mike, I'm handling it. You focus on your tech stuff." Classic deflection. As a network architect, I'm professionally paranoid. My job is to anticipate points of failure, to build in redundancy. So, 6 months ago, after one particularly evasive conversation about a large withdrawal from our joint savings, I'd quietly taken some precautions. I opened a separate bank account, diverting a portion of my direct deposit there. I also started a meticulous, encrypted backup of all our shared digital assets, financial statements, legal documents, even old family photos, to a secure cloud server only I controlled, something I set up using my professional skills in data security. I'd told myself it was just good financial hygiene, like running a network scan. Now I knew it was more like building a lifeboat. The night before she sent that text, she'd kissed me goodbye before leaving for a marketing conference. "Big things are coming for us, Mike," she'd said, a strange glitter in her eyes. I'd thought she meant a promotion. I was a fool. We met at a university alumni mixer. I was a junior sysadmin then, still dreaming of designing global networks. She was a recent marketing grad, vibrant and full of ideas. She said she admired my focus, my quiet determination. I loved her energy, the way she could light up a room. We married 2 years later. A small ceremony, friends and family. She'd sometimes joke about me being a digital ghost, always more comfortable with machines than people, but she'd also praise my stability, my methodical approach to life. "You're my anchor, Mike," she used to say. We bought the house in a decent suburb, a 1970s ranch we slowly updated. I rewired the whole place myself, ran Cat 6 to every room, built a smart home system from scratch. Our weekends were once filled with DI projects, laughter, shared dreams. We talked about kids, then decided we were happy with our careers and our 2 Maine Coons. The memories, once warm, now felt like shards of glass. How could the woman who'd traced the network diagrams on my blueprints with genuine interest, who'd patiently listened to my rants about network latency, be the same one who'd just executed this cold, brutal severance? The differences had always been there, I suppose, like subtle bugs in code that only become critical under stress. I valued stability, careful planning. Sarah craved excitement, faster results. My idea of a good investment was a diversified portfolio, long-term growth. Hers increasingly became about high-risk, high-reward ventures pitched by people like Julian Vance. A few years ago, she wanted us to invest a significant chunk of our savings into a guaranteed real estate scheme her friend pitched. I researched it. My professional habit of due diligence kicked in. It was a thinly veiled pyramid. I presented my findings, spreadsheets, market comparisons, red flags. She accused me of being too cautious, of not believing in her. That was the first major crack. Then there was the issue of lifestyle. She started wanting more expensive vacations, a newer car, designer clothes to keep up with her networking circle. My salary was good, hers too, but her spending outpaced our combined income. I tried to talk about budgeting, financial planning. "Mike, you can't architect happiness with a spreadsheet," she'd retorted. The third event was more insidious. About 8 months ago, she started obsessively talking about our home equity. "We're sitting on a gold mine, Mike," she'd say. "Julian says we can leverage it for amazing returns." I'd been resistant. The house was our security, not a poker chip. Each disagreement was a dropped packet in our connection until the entire network of our marriage just timed out. The day after Sarah's text, sitting in that sterile motel room, my network architect brain kicked in, pushing past the emotional static. This wasn't just a divorce. "I've taken what's mine," sounded possessive, pre-emptive. It hinted at financial action already taken. My first logical anchor was my professional skill set. I remotely accessed the detailed logs for our home network, which I had meticulously configured for security and monitoring, a perk, or curse, of my profession. I wasn't looking at her private messages, I was looking at metadata, traffic patterns, connected devices. There it was over the past few weeks, numerous encrypted sessions to unfamiliar IP addresses, ones that resolved to financial institutions I didn't recognize, and large, regular uploads to a specific cloud storage service, not our shared family one. My blood ran cold. This was more than moving her clothes out. This felt systematic. One log entry stood out, a secure connection initiated from our home IP to a banking portal I knew she rarely used, followed by a large data transfer that coincided with the approximate time our joint savings account, holding nearly $150,000, was last accessed, according to my bank app, which now showed a balance of $87,130. The timestamp was 2 days before her text. This wasn't just an affair and a divorce. This was looking like a coordinated financial drain. The shock was profound, but a cold, analytical anger began to crystallize. My next step was to leverage my professional network, or rather, a personal connection who happened to be a professional. David Chen. We'd been roommates in college, pulled all-nighters coding, and he'd gone on to become a sharp lawyer specializing in financial fraud and cybercrime. I called him from a burner phone I bought that morning. "David, it's Mike Evans. I'm in a serious situation." I laid out the facts, the text, the drained account, the suspicious network activity I'd uncovered through my routine home network monitoring logs, which I had access to as the administrator and owner of the equipment. David listened, his responses brief, to the point, no emotional platitudes, just sharp questions. Did she have sole access to transfer from the joint account? Or was it set for dual authorization for large sums? Technically dual for over $10,000, but I think she found a workaround, or I missed a change in terms. I admitted, a fresh wave of self-recrimination washing over me. "Send me what you have on the network logs. Encrypted, of course, and any pre-existing financial documents you backed up." His calm, methodical approach was a lifeline. He wasn't just a friend, he was a professional engaging a problem. I felt a sliver of control returning. I wasn't just a victim, I was a client with actionable data. With David guiding me, we delved deeper. That encrypted backup I'd made 6 months prior, my professional habit of accidental preparedness, became invaluable. It contained pristine copies of all our financial statements, tax returns, and even scanned copies of loan applications before Sarah started handling everything. David engaged a forensic accountant. Together, they cross-referenced my backups with the fragmented information we could pull from current, mostly empty accounts. The picture that emerged was chilling. It wasn't just the joint savings. Smaller, regular transfers had been siphoning money from my salary into new accounts for months. Credit cards had been opened in my name, with statements rerouted to a P.O. box. And then, the forensic accountant found it, buried in a digital file Sarah had carelessly left on our shared cloud drive before creating her new secret one, a draft of a home equity line of credit application. My signature was on it. A very good forgery, but not perfect. The pressure on the M in Michael was wrong, the loop in the E slightly off. Things only someone who stares at digital signatures and network diagrams for a living might obsess over. Or a forensic expert. This wasn't just Sarah leaving me, this was a meticulously planned financial assault, orchestrated with Julian Vance. His name was listed as the financial consultant on several of the new account applications. The disappointment was a physical H. The woman I loved hadn't just fallen out of love, she'd, with a partner, systematically plundered our shared life. But alongside the pain, a cold, hard resolve formed. They saw me as a target. They were about to find out I was also a systems analyst who understood how to trace vulnerabilities. The anger was still there, a molten core beneath layers of ice, but it was now channeled. I wasn't grieving the relationship anymore. I was analyzing a hostile system, identifying its weaknesses. My conversations with David were like project meetings. We had data, we had anomalies, we needed a strategy. The enemy, Sarah and Julian, believed I was a predictable, non-confrontational tech guy, easily blindsided, likely to crumble. That was their critical miscalculation. My profession had taught me patience, attention to detail, and how to build resilient systems. Now, I would apply that to dismantling theirs. We identified their likely next moves: consolidate the stolen funds, try to legitimize the fraudulent eloque, and pressure me into a quick, unfavorable divorce settlement. Sarah's desire for a swift, adult resolution, as her text suggested, was probably driven by Julian's need to secure the assets before I could react. My mindset shifted. I was no longer the betrayed husband. I was the architect of a counteroffensive. No dramatic confrontations, no emotional outbursts. Just cold, calculated steps documented and legally sound, like debugging a critical exploit one precise action at a time. Our strategy, devised with David, wasn't about setting an elaborate trap that relied on coincidence. It was about creating an opportunity for them to expose their own fraudulent behavior further, under circumstances we could legally monitor and document. David explained that the forged talaq was our strongest leverage, but we needed to show ongoing intent. My logical anchor of occupational habit provided the next step. I'd always maintained meticulous records of all software licenses and hardware MAC addresses on my home network, primarily for security and inventory. Reviewing these, I realized Sarah had recently bought a new, high-end laptop, one whose MAC address had been prominent in those suspicious financial transactions logged on my network. She probably thought by using a new device she was being clever. David advised we could sell with my existing administrative access to my network, and devices I owned enable more detailed logging on my router specifically for traffic to known fraudulent IP addresses David's team had already started to identify as associated with Julian Vance's shell corporations. Crucially, David also suggested I make it seem I was out of the country for an emergency work project, a common occurrence in my line of work. I emailed Sarah as emailing my personal, secure email that David had access to, using a tone of bewildered hurt, stating I was being sent to Singapore for a week by my company to deal with a massive data center outage and that we needed to talk when I got back. Figure this out amicably. I even booked a refundable one-way ticket to Singapore and accidentally left the confirmation in a shared digital folder I knew she still peripherally checked, and sent a vague, boarding soon, can't talk text. The goal: make them think they had a clear window to finalize their financial maneuvers. The bait worked. 2 days into my supposed Singapore trip, C was actually holed up in a hotel near David's office, monitoring everything remotely. The router logs lit up. Sarah's new laptop initiated a series of connections to the very shell company accounts David had flagged, and then to a new, unfamiliar bank. It looked like she was consolidating funds. Simultaneously, David got a notification from a credit monitoring service he'd put on my accounts, an inquiry from a title company. They were trying to rush the HELOC through. The critical moment came when Sarah, likely instructed by Julian, logged into my primary desktop computer in the home office, a machine I owned, for which I was the administrator, to try and access some old tax documents she thought she needed for the HELOF. My remote access software, legally installed years ago for my own remote work and system maintenance, silently logged her keystrokes and screen activity as she navigated to a specific folder, opened a file clearly labeled Mike's Private Investment Portfolio, DO known as CCES, and then attempted to print it. The folder was a honeypot I'd set up, containing doctored documents suggesting a much larger, liquid asset base than I actually possessed, designed to make them greedy and reckless. The screen recording showed her exclaiming in surprise, then making a call to Julian, discussing this newfound wealth. It was all there: unauthorized access to my personal machine, clear intent to use private information, and verbal confirmation of their conspiracy. We had them. David was practically purring. That, Michael, is digital dynamite. The satisfaction wasn't a hot rush of revenge. It was the quiet click of a perfectly executed plan, a system performing exactly as designed. The following Monday, David, armed with my router logs, the screen recordings, the forensic accounting report, and the documented forgery on the HELOC, presented the entire package to the white-collar crime division of the local DA's office and the FBI, given the potential for wire fraud across state lines due to Julian's operations. The evidence was irrefutable, painting a clear picture of systematic fraud. The forged signature, the clandestine transfers, the attempt to leverage non-existent assets — it was all laid out. An assistant DA, a young, sharp woman named Maria Sanchez, was assigned the case. She listened intently, her expression growing more serious with each piece of evidence David presented from the meticulously organized digital folders I'd prepared, a habit from managing complex network documentation. The authorities moved quickly. Warrants were issued. I imagined Sarah's panic when investigators showed up at the house, her new beginning, abruptly turning into a criminal investigation. Julian Vance, it turned out, had a history of preying on vulnerable individuals, though he'd always managed to skirt major charges. Not this time. The detailed digital trail I'd been able to provide, thanks to my IT background and proactive data hygiene, was the missing link they needed. There was a quiet hum of satisfaction in knowing my professional skills had unearthed the truth. The ball was now in their court. I felt a sense of relief, the heavy burden of investigation lifting. The full extent of Julian Vance's operation came to light during the investigation. He wasn't just a charming con man, he ran a sophisticated network that specialized in identifying individuals often recently divorced or widowed, or, like me, spouses of people he could manipulate with accessible assets, particularly home equity and retirement funds. Sarah, it seemed, was both a perpetrator and, in some ways, a pawn. Lured by Vance's promises of a lavish lifestyle and quick wealth, she had willingly participated in the initial fraud against me. Her motivation, as pieced together from her tearful and self-serving confession to investigators, was a cocktail of dissatisfaction with our boring, stable life, a desire for the glamour Vance projected, and a genuine belief that I was hiding money from her, a seed Vance had expertly planted. She claimed he'd convinced her the Hilo Cully was a way to reclaim what was rightfully hers before I tied it all up. The investigation revealed at least 5 other victims of Vance's schemes, though my case was the most digitally documented. The numbers were staggering. He'd siphoned close to $2 million over 3 years. Seeing the web of deceit laid bare was sickening, yet also validating. It wasn't just my life he'd tried to wreck. My actions were having a wider impact. The legal process churned on. Julian Vance, facing overwhelming evidence, especially the digital forensics, eventually pleaded guilty to multiple counts of wire fraud, aggravated identity theft, and conspiracy. He was sentenced to 12 years in federal prison. Sarah, in exchange for her cooperation against Vance and full restitution of the funds she'd personally diverted, most of which the authorities managed to freeze before Vance could hide it completely, received 5 years probation, a hefty fine, and a felony conviction for forgery and conspiracy to commit fraud. She had to sell her car, and her mother co-signed a loan to pay back what she'd spent. The divorce was finalized quickly amidst the criminal proceedings. The settlement was stark. She forfeited all claims to the house, which, thankfully, the fraudulent HELOC key had been voided on, my retirement accounts, and any other assets. The judge, looking at the evidence of her calculated betrayal while I was being led to believe I was in a committed marriage, was not sympathetic to her pleas. It was a clean, decisive break, enshrined in legal documents. I felt a profound sense of closure, like excising a tumor. The future was uncertain, a blank network topology map, but it was mine to design. The house, our home, was tainted. Every room echoed with betrayal. I sold it within 3 months of the divorce finalization, taking a slight loss just to be rid of it. The proceeds, along with what remained of my savings and the recovered funds, were enough for a new start. I didn't want another suburban box. I wanted something completely different. I took a sabbatical from my high-stress corporate job. My experience had left me re-evaluating what secure truly meant. It wasn't just about firewalls and encryption, it was about authenticity, about building a life that couldn't be so easily compromised from within. I ended up buying a small plot of land in rural Oregon, overlooking a valley. I started designing a modest, sustainable, smart home myself, not with off-the-shelf tech, but custom building the systems, a therapeutic process. During this time, I began volunteering my IT skills to a local nonprofit that helped victims of elder financial abuse, setting up secure communication systems and teaching seniors about online safety. One afternoon, a caseworker told me, "Mike, the secure reporting system you built, it helped us get an emergency injunction for Mrs. Henderson. Her nephew was draining her accounts. You might have saved her life savings." That single sentence resonated more deeply than any corporate bonus ever had. My counterattack, born of personal pain, had found a new, more meaningful purpose. It wasn't just about recovering what was mine, it was about using my skills to protect others. The anger had long since faded, replaced by a quiet strength and a sense of peace I hadn't felt in years. I was rebuilding not just a house, but a life, on a foundation of genuine purpose. My network was smaller now, but infinitely more secure.